So what we're going to go ahead and do is I'm going to show you how I create the charts that I work with from photographs using the Stitch Fiddle desktop version. I do have the paid version. It is, I think, like $5.99 a month or $30 annually. There's a lot of stuff that you do get in the paid version that you don't get in the free, but you are allowed up to like 30 charts on the free version if you want to check it out and play around with it if it's something that you like. I'm not sponsored or anything by them, but I do use them on a daily basis. So I went ahead and I just grabbed 3 photos to kind of create into a chart and show you a little bit about how I work with it. So obviously you can see there's many different types of, crafts that you can do on here. Obviously mine is the crochet. I do the crochet color work for here. You can choose your yarn brand. There's, basically you can choose colors from here if you don't preference, or if you use one of these 4 brands. It is kind of nice having the built-in colors because sometimes you can get some really nuanced colors that you just can't find the perfect color for. So typically I use the Hobby Lobby. I love this yarn. It just is up the road from me, and they do have the colors that I tend to use. I have also used Loops and Threads has a decent, affordable color chart. I usually use acrylic yarn for these types of projects just for price point because it does take so much yarn. So we're going to go ahead and look at the 4 picture. I'm going to grab where is it? This one? Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and use the pattern for the dragon eye portrait that I did and just show you kind of how I recreated making that chart, what you can do in this for a picture like this, and go from there. So first thing, after you choose it, you do have some options to crop. With a photo, something like this is an Adobe stock image of a dragon eye, so it is a very detailed photograph, which is nice. You want to make sure that there's a lot of detail included. You can crop this in a way that is balanced. A lot of this background here is going to get a little fuzzy. It's going to use a lot of yarn if you were to keep it in. So just trying to find that balance of where to crop. And so basically we're just going to grab up to like the top of the eyelid here into the corner. And I think in my original one I really like this line of scales here, so I made sure that was added. I think I added a little bit more of the eyelid so we can expand it just a little bit. I'm not going to replicate my exact chart that I did, but I'm just going to show you kind of how I did it. So basically, if you do have a very large photo, or if you do have, let's say, like the subject matter in the photo is in the foreground, I do recommend highly cropping it. Backgrounds on this type of form art, not saying they can't work, but if they're kind of fuzzy, blurry, the detail may not be there. So having a very highly defined subject matter within the photograph is going to help with not a lot of background noise. You can even do Photoshop to actually just isolate the subject and remove the background completely, which I have done, and that just helps a lot with the details. So next thing we're going to talk about is gauge. So basically I have done my own calculation and I know it works with my gauge. I do have several ways that I can't work a project, which the gauge matters. So when I carry, I usually estimate 6 colors. The gauge work I do is 20 stitches by 10 rows. That is like when I carry six colors. If I carry 4 or 3 colors, I usually can get this down to like either 11 or 12, something like that. It's just kind of one of those numbers I was able to figure out with practice. One way you can do it is kind of hard because inevitably you have to factor in carrying colors, and so it's kind of hard to do a practice swatch in that way. But if you do have any sort of way to do and carry some colors, get some scrap yarn, do 10 stitches by 10 rows, and just calculate your gauge from there and what it takes. I can just say that, hey, the more the colors you carry, the more rectangular this gets. So actually it would be this number of stitches would probably stay the same because that's kind of based on the 3.25 millimeter hook I use. But the number of rows is the taller the stitch, the more colors you carry. The less colors you carry, the more square that gauge is going to become. So 6 colors. If I work in horizontal rows, my gauge is this 20/10. In this particular project, I actually worked vertically. So basically the horizontal, or I worked it right to left vertically instead of like bottom to top horizontally. So I swapped my gauge like that. And I'll show you a little bit so you can kind of see that instead of the squareness of these pixels, they kind of elongate like that. So if I was to work it horizontally, and you can ignore it, like change in shape, you kind of can see that these all of a sudden become very vertical. And so it's up to you as far as, if I just remove exact size here, you can see the full picture. So this would be if I worked each row from here to here and then straight up. You can kind of see it's going to really stretch it a little bit with those verticals. The system does do a good job of balancing the photo, but I guess in short, you're going to lose a little bit of a detail in the eye doing it this way. It doesn't look horrible, but basically I was playing around with the gauge, swapping it. Hey, do I want to work it horizontally or do I want to work it vertically? Uncheck exact. And you just get a little bit more detail when you work it. So I start here, work up, and then I work backwards this way. So here, this is going to give you approximate size. So you enter whatever your longest side is. So in this case, 300 stitches is going to be, I'm working it vertically. So here to here is 300, top to bottom. And then 208 is the number of rows that I would work across. And this is going to give you the size of the piece, which is about almost what I did. I think I was like 60 by 90 was my finished piece. So I cropped it a little different. So that's pretty much how that's calculated. And so that's going to be how you play with. Yes, you can specify the width. Obviously, if I take away height, it's going to like delete it. So I just unchecked that. I want the full picture that I cropped. Here, like I said, I changed it back to 208. So if I do 330, you can really see the detail, but this piece is going to be ginormous, 91 by 66. So if that's something that you do want to do as big as I did, that's perfectly fine. I don't recommend going a whole lot because this is about, 90, almost $100 worth of yarn. It's like 25 skeins when I did the full calculation. So obviously up to you. You don't want to go absolutely ginormous. If you want to go back down to like 275, you lose a little bit, but it's not horrible. So that's going to get you about 76 by 55. So here you have some controls for the number of colors, brightness, and contrast. You can specify or choose colors of yarn. If you do choose to do that from here, I have a better way of doing it. I let the system choose automatically, and then I actually have a way of nicely going back and later if I want to edit what colors. So we're gonna get this down to 6 colors. Again, I don't normally do more than 6 just because the height of the stitch, as well as just the amount of yarn and amount of colors that you want to carry. So here you have the brightness and the contrast controls. Obviously, this is just going to take clicking around and seeing what you prefer. So obviously, the more contrast that you add, you're going to have to just play and see what hits. I'm going to go ahead and increase this back to my 330. I have noticed a lot of times if you have a really detailed piece, like let's say within this eye, if you actually remove the contrast, You kind of go low on the contrast, you tend to find a little bit of more of a balance to find those details. And then you can kind of darken it more and let's just find that balance. And again, this is just going to be a lot of clicking. What do you like? What do you don't like? Obviously going too far. So I want to make sure we're not losing the details in the eye. So let's try to find. What if we go? I brighten it. So here, like I said, you can kind of find, I'm not horribly worried about what colors are chosen. I want to actually emphasize the detail because I can always change the colors later and play around with that. So what I'm looking for is the balance of the picture where I don't lose a whole lot of detail, obviously within the iris, but this corner of this eye as well. So darken it, lighten it. Let's see if we can get decrease. So now we're getting somewhere. So now I can kind of see these scales real nice. I have a little bit of detail in here and I can still see the eye. And every now and then I don't mind actually increasing the number of colors. And I can show you later about how I post then remove them. But I want to make sure I get the details that I like, and then I can always edit and go in later. So if I move that to 8, let's see what it does. I want to go contrast. So here we go. This is getting a little better. If I remove a lot, let's see. So that's not horrible. So I know the colors are like a little bit icky, but I'm not mad at it. So basically I do get the nice reflection. I have details in the iris. I'm not losing this corner. I have a nice defined scales, a little bit of highlights. Gets a little muddy up here. But that's easily fixed. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. Yes, I saved it with 8 colors. But what you'll notice once you save it, obviously you get a lot more tools. And you have under the edit palette, we get these colors. You have the ability to edit what colors from here. So this is nice because you can say, hey, all dark denim is going to change. All forest green is going to change. In the previous screen, if you were to choose colors, it almost like recalculates the entire image and it gets really fuzzy. That's why I don't normally use it that much. Another thing you can do here is obviously there's only 508 and 7066 of these dark olive and purple. I'm not going to buy that much yarn for only 500 stitches. So you can see this little purple here mixed in. It's going to be up here. It's not adding a whole lot of details. So I'm going to go ahead and remove it, and then I'm going to replace it. So I don't want to go the darkest color with it to replace. I'm probably going to replace it with this green. You can kind of see the picture. I didn't lose detail here and the eye and all the places I didn't want. So now I'm going to do the same thing with the dark olive. And as you can see, this reasonably gets me down to the 6 colors. And so I do that. I've done it. I've saved an image with 10 colors and whittled it down to 7. Like it's, there's things that you can do to really, make sure you're not losing the details just by decreasing colors. So what I'm going to go ahead and here is now we're going to play around with changing the colors. So if you love black yarn can be really dramatic. Really bring out details that you didn't even know that were there. So it's really fun to play with. This piece obviously uses a lot of black, so just keep that in mind if you really hate it. You can really replace it with a dark brown or a navy blue, and it still has a really nice effect. if you want to go in that direction. I actually want to use, I do want to stay with black, was my original color scheme. And then here we'll want to play around with, hey, what is going to be our main color? So this is this green right now that is playing with. I don't mind the forest green. They do have this dark olive, which gives a little bit more yellow tint, which is nice with the highlights. And then if we want to play around here, we can say, let's look at this mid-green. So that's going to give color to the eyeball as well as this over here. So it might be fun. I know in my original piece, this is the one I chose with the, I think it was the mixed berry. And then if we change, instead of doing the green theme, we do the purple. Let's see what that does. And then the highlights, we did the burnt and the sun gold. Let's see. So actually, okay, I want to do this one, the gray mist, as the burnt orange. And this one, it didn't have a whole lot, but let's pull that back to this coffee black and see what happens. Okay, so similarly to the one that I did, you can kind of see how I played around with those colors. And, you know, like I said, we have to really play around, see what we like. I think let's do, instead of purple, let's go brown. Gets a little bit more interesting. And so the point of it being is it has to be interesting. It doesn't have to be, you know, matching exactly what you did on those, on the photos. I'm gonna revert that, so Control Z. And like I said, I didn't replicate my chart. Like I already created that other chart. It took a long time of me back and forth. I did a lot of adjusting, contrast work. I don't want to do like an hour and a half video of you just watching me click around on the contrast, but this definitely is an example of how I'd create a chart and go from there. So I'm going to go ahead and let's do, I want to just create a new one. So I want to do another example. So we're just going to do the crochet color work from picture. And let's grab, I liked this picture. So what it is a very dark piece. It's a black swan, but it has very bright colors. So one thing that you'll want to note when you're doing, again, choosing a photo of, you know, your subject matter is having a defined, you know, piece, a defined like subject matter. And when you have something like this where the background is very dark and then you might have a few highlights, it can be both very frustrating because this itself is like 4 colors. You almost have a black, red, light orange, white. So that's 4 of the 6 colors just in this face, and you're gonna have to have the other almost like 2 left over, 2 or 3 for this background, and you don't want to lose the detail. So it's going to be an interesting piece to see if we can make it in 6 colors, but it's definitely a piece that I wanted to point out. If you do something like this, it can be very interesting but very hard. So I would almost, with some photos starting out, just make them black and white. Just remove all those really intense highlights and really intense lowlights for pieces like this, because it's going to give you a better balanced chart across the board. So here we're going to go ahead and always remember, let's do, this is kind of a vertical piece, so let's do this 20/10. So my stitches are going to be in the vertical. So you can kind of see it stretched it a little bit. I'm not horribly mad at that. 250 wide is going to give you a 50/80 piece. So you probably don't want to go more than that. There's 250 from right to left here. And then you'll have 200 rows going up. So let's dwindle this to 9, see what happens. play around a little bit here. And so we want to just, like I said, even with 9 colors, you'll see there's a lot of detail in these feathers, but I don't want to lose this beak. So let's see what we can do here. So you can kind of see the system like to, almost, get rid of that red beak. It made, these grays the same as the feather. It's not a bad piece, but kind of the point of the piece was to make sure we highlighted that beak. So let's see what we can do. Okay, so what I like about this, even though this green is ugly, is I don't see this green a lot in these feathers necessarily. So this is something that when I go to save this chart, I can change this gray to a very light white, and I don't think it would affect it. It will still get the beak color, but without like making the feathers, that color. So you can kind of see over here we got 9 colors. I don't know if I dwindle that. See, if I remove that 9th, all of a sudden this beak is solid and you get all these feathers on the same color. So let's just see what we can do. I'm not horribly convinced that we'll be able to save this, but let's see if we change that to, let's do a almost light yellow. Okay. So I'm not hating it. Obviously, like I said, it kept the highlights up here and then the feathers, and we didn't lose that beak, which is really pretty. And so what if we take this gray and almost do that? Again, I'm not horribly mad at it. So I think it's an interesting dynamic here. And we can change, let's do this to the gray beard. Okay. And I have a lot of blue. And then what I want to go ahead and do, so this is, because I have navy blue and then I have this dark denim. Where can so this probably light blue can go away. So let's move this to, it goes best with the navy, I think. And how much graphite? We don't have a whole lot of graphite. What if we do this, go move that to black? Okay. Again, I don't mind it. Okay, so I'm down to 7. I don't know if I can quite dwindle it down even more. I don't want to lose these feather details up here in the head if I was to combine the blues. So 7 is not horrible. It's definitely better than 9. We can kind of keep our gauge. And it's, it's an interesting piece. I don't think, like I said, I'm not horribly mad at it. And so, yes, basically, again, I did this in the vertical. So it's going to stretch the piece slightly, inevitably. Like I said, it's not something I focus on. If it is something that bugs you and you want to get more square, inevitably you're going to have to do less colors. But like I said, I actually kind of like that. I think there's something I can go in and manually do some editing as well. If we want to clean up the eye a little bit. That was way too close. You have to kind of let it catch up a bit. We have options here. If I remember to do this chart, we'll hide real quick. And this is, like I said, you have the ability in here if we want to gray these out and not highlight the eye quite as much as it is. And it's funny, it's like it almost needs a little bit of like a red reflection in the eye. So I'm not horribly mad at that. So let's see if that kind of If we zoom back out, if it's a little less glaring. Okay, I actually like that. Okay. And so here, when you go to, let's say, this is the paid version, so you have the chart. This is going to be where you choose what direction you're going to work in. I always work it right to left. And this one, I am going to work right to left, and then the row's going up, so this is what that's demonstrating. If you do want to print it, obviously you'll want to choose the show grid lines. Right now I don't want to look at it. And then from here, when you download the chart, you have options about how many pages. You're going to want that 12 to 12 is going to be pretty tiny still. 28 pages if you do want to do a chart. You do have this. You can do a margin, landscape. You also have the option to do colors and symbols, which is really good for printing because the difference between the blues is going to be really hard to find. So that's the chart version. You also have a written version where, again, you'll want to choose the direction of the piece because that's obviously going to be a big matter in how you write it. You have the option of how you want the beginning of the rows to be labeled. So if you look at the download page, you can kind of see what it's set to now. I always just I don't enclose, and then I just do the count before, and I just do custom, and all I do is add a space like that. You have the option of if you have one stitch, do you want to show like one navy blue, one black, or do you just want to show navy blue? And it saves on ink, saves on paper. Totally up to you if you want to do it. You can change descriptions of the yarn here to the abbreviation. You can change it. And so here on now on the preview, you can kind of see the counts. Like that. So main thing is going to be make sure you have the direction right. That way you don't get too confused. There's also a detect repeats automatically I usually like to play around with. If it's going to be just like, let's see if we can find one. Here we go. So if you have, one of these situations, instead of writing navy blue, 3 black, navy blue, 3 black, it puts it in brackets. Again, saves a little paper, saves a little ink if you do print it off. All right. So I don't mind that. I think it's interesting. It's seven colors is a lot to do, but it's definitely interesting. So let's do our last example I had. This was a flower. And so a lot of these black and white photographs, like I said, they don't have a whole lot of color. You can really play around a lot with these. In that basically you took away a lot of those like major highlights that are going to take, like a red beak is going to take 2 colors minimum of your 6 that you have available. So having this black and white photos, monochrome, sepia, whatever you want to filter by, is really going to help detail your piece. So here we're going to work it horizontally. Again, you can always, zoom in on this, or you can just say exact size. You can see it elongates a little bit. If that's too bothersome, we could work it in the vertical by doing it this way. It didn't change it a whole lot, but it is a little bit more balanced and not so stretched. So if we just narrow it down to 6, let's see what we got. And so with black and white, I really highly recommend removing the contrast as much as possible because you really want those gray tones shaded in. We can increase this. I usually do 330 for my vertical pieces. Decrease that. And honestly, that actually wasn't horribly bad right there. There we go. So it doesn't, some of them like pop right in, and others you really just have to sit here and play with, and it's annoying. So I don't want to lose these little black tips is what I'm trying to, but I'm not minding, really not minding that. So And then I'll just go ahead, yes, you can come in here and choose colors. Just know, like, let's say if I grab black, like if I check black, it doesn't necessarily add that in because it's saying, oh, it doesn't need black. So it's a little funny. If I was to come in here and remove the darkest color, if I remove Graybeard, let's see if it does. So now it looks like it changed it to the dark denim, and then it changed it to the dark green. So you can kind of see a little bit of, if you do come in here and choose colors, you're almost fighting against it a little bit. And so that's why I don't necessarily use that. I just say choose automatically, choose 6. I can go in and change it later. It's not my favorite thing to use this. If you have a better technique of doing it, totally cool. So here, and then another thing I did was playing around with was if I had a black and white, I actually like reverted it. So I just switched where my lightest color became my darkest, and I swapped it that way to make almost like an inversion, like negative, which some of these flowers in black and whites are pretty cool. If that's something that you're interested in doing, it takes a minute because you got to find the colors and remember the colors. So that is going to become Gray Mist. Let's see if this doesn't take too much time. If I swap Spa for Forest. And one of these days I will learn the order of the colors in here. There it is. And Forest becomes Spa. And then Graybeard is Light Sage. And Light Sage is Graybeard. Okay. So you kind of get an it's just interesting, if that's something that you want to play with and be artistic about. You obviously can edit it in a photo editor and then upload it totally. But just like I said, I was playing around with this the other day and I thought it was a cool effect. I even saved one in the negative, saved one on the regular colors, and I just like copy paste because you do have the option here of copy pasting. And so I copy pasted basically like it both in positive and negative and created that effect. And it didn't take too long. Like I said, you can't do it in a photo editor, but it honestly wasn't too bad. You can kind of see, again, it's really cool. At least in my opinion, you only have to use the same 6 colors. It's not going to add colors to your project. So just some ideas.
If you made it this far in the video, I appreciate your time. Let me know your thoughts and comment below, and let me know if you want to see anything else specific, and feel free to share with me your ideas. Thank you.